does it stay up like this?
It does.
Like I shouldn't fold it down?
Nope.
Okay.
That's what's coming into fashion in the 1830s is these sort of lower cut shawl collar vests like you have on.
Okay.
Checks and stripes are hugely in fashion, and they really starting during this period.
Oh, really?
And then they sort of explode as the decades continue into the 1840s, 50s, and 60s as well. So you're on the cutting edge right now.
Nice.
So the finishing touch, we have a couple of different hats for you to try on.
Yep.
So what was typical in this period is both felt and fur hats. So felt hats refers to usually wool felt. Fur hats would be beaver and or rabbit fur or some mix. So we have some of those. And then straw hats. So we're sort of right on the cusp of the time of year to be wearing straw hats unless they're very fashionable. So we'll try on a few and see which one you like. That seems probably like you're wearing a lot, but that is the sort of pinnacle of fashion that you're being seen in right now.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. 1830s were all about a lot of statement clothing.
Hi, I'm Rajiv, and today I'm here at Old Sturbridge Village, a beautiful living history museum that illustrates what life would have been like here in New England in the 1830s. So, as many of you have known from my continual referencing of my previous job at a living history museum in Toronto, I did this. I was a historic interpreter at a place just like this in Toronto. For 10 summers, all through high school, all through college, I would show up at the historic site, go into a little room, change out of my modern clothes, put on my old clothes, and then I would be transported into a world that was really genuinely like stepping back in time. And just listen. As soon as I stepped into that world, it even sounded different. And for those 10 summers, it was like magic. I learned how to blacksmith, I learned how to carve wood, I learned how to bake bread in a brick oven, and I learned how to spin, dye, and process wool directly from the backs of sheep that we kept on the property. So today, I am so honored to be able to come here to Old Sturbridge Village and reenact my old job of going from these beautiful sheep, shearing that sheep, washing the wool, carding the wool, spinning the wool, and I am overjoyed to be able to share this process with you. Every single day when I would go to work at Pioneer Village in Toronto, before the crowds came in, before the kids came in, I would be on my way to my little building and I would stop and look at the sheep. There's just something kind of magical, kind of spiritual about looking at them and thinking of all the thousands of years that these beautiful little animals have kept us warm. I'm here with Dave Haruska, who is the coordinator of agriculture here at Old Sturbridge Village. Dave, you know how to do something that's very niche. You know how to shear a sheep with actual shears. How did you get into this? How did you learn how to do this?
Well, I learned it right here. I started working here about 13 years ago on the farm. Part of a farmer's job is taking care of his animals in all respects, and we're very much generalists, so that includes being able to not only feed, water, clean up after your sheep, but also shear them.
Wow. To me, that's really daunting because the process, especially using these, is a bit scary. So I'm really excited to see that today. How often does this happen?
Once a year.
Once a year, in the spring?
Yep, and there's a couple good reasons for that. You don't want to shear too often because the length of each fiber, the staple, is a big part of the value. So shearing more often is going to give you the exact same amount of wool, but in half the fiber length.
Right.
So, but you don't want to go longer than a year because most breeds of sheep, through the long time they spent with people, have been bred so that they no longer shed their wool. So domesticated sheep, wild sheep are different, they have the ability to shed, but domesticated sheep, if you don't shear them, that wool will just continue to grow. And all the lanolin the sheep produces also gets soaked up by the wool and adds weight, and then any dirt or twigs or things that get caught in the wool also add weight. So eventually it would be like if every year you put on another winter coat without removing the old one, eventually you'd have so much padding and fluff you couldn't be able to move. And it's the same thing that happens with domesticated sheep. So they require a trim.
And I used to always say at our historic village that it's about the time of year when we put our winter coats away for good, for the warm weather. That's the time of year when we're shearing sheep. So really, end of April, early May, mid-May, that's traditionally when it would be done in this part of the world, right?
Yep, and with the fresh green grass coming in May and June, that's going to be the best food and the most available food, and so they're going to regrow a layer of wool very quickly.
Nice. So I guess now we need a sheep, right?
Well, I've got 2 in this barn. Let's go
Okay.
get one.
Do they have names?
No.
Dave is using actual shears, just like the shears that would have been made 200 years ago. He keeps them sharp, he keeps them rust-free.
Yeah, and just like any skill, that requires tools, having good quality tools will make a world of difference in taking care of them. Keeping it nice and sharp is going to help you work safely. Your livestock was about the most valuable thing that you owned outside of maybe the land itself, so you want to take really good care of them.
Listen to the sound of the tool compared to something that you're plugging in and that's making a hideous buzzing sound. Yes, there's so much advantage that has come with technology, but there's also concessions that are made.
Yeah, I agree.
You're doing this task, but you're very conscious that it is an animal and you're listening to it.
Yep. Working together is a big part of it.
The trick is not just to keep his feet off the ground, but keep him secure and steady. If he feels stable in whatever awkward position I've put him in,
Yeah?
he's going to just kind of relax. But if he feels unsteady as he's about to tip over or fall over, then he's going to struggle to get to a stable position.
And a huge part of that has to do with you being calm too, right?
Yep.
Like if you're nervous and shaking around, he'll feel that, right?
Yeah, and I think that's something people really sort of forget or underestimate a lot of animals' ability to read people. Especially a lot of the livestock animals we got. Sheep and cattle, they're herd animals. They live in a big extended family group. They don't have a language. They communicate through body language. Yeah. So I think a lot of animals are much more adept at sort of reading human body language. They do it much more intuitively than we're able to read theirs.
Especially when your body is pressed right up against it.
Oh, they can feel everything.
Oh, yeah.
They know exactly what's going on.
When I would try to cut my childhood dog's nails, if I would hesitate, she would bite me. But
Yep.
if I just did it and didn't hesitate, she would just stay still.
Yep.
It was so funny. The moment I questioned myself, she knew.
And it's like, all right, if you're not going to be in charge, I will be.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so
He's done?
there we go.
So this is the entire fleece.
This is the entire fleece, and this is the goal, is to get it off in kind of one big piece.
This is the center back.
Yep.
This is the tail.
Yep, that's the tail end.
And
then
these
this
are the
is
shoulders, right?
Yep.
So if I can recall correctly, the nicest wool for spinning was over here. Is that correct?
Yep.
So Dave, can you kind of, because I forget, can you speak to the different parts of the fleece? Because they wouldn't really throw anything away, right?
Yep.
Like this would all go to the carding mill and then
Get carded and,
Separated.
and so as you can see, this all currently is pretty matted and gross. So it needs to be picked first of all, where you'd find, here's, a stick, a bit of bedding. The fleece would get washed or scoured to remove all the grease and dirt. And then, you'd break it up, and the different bits would be used for different things. So like you said, the very best wool, this would be your spinning wool. It's not just the fineness of the wool that determines how fine of a thread you can make, but the longer that staple is, the finer a thread you can spin, because really what you're doing when you're spinning is you have these fibers and you're twisting them tight together. And wool works a bit like Velcro on a microscopic level. And so the longer each individual fiber of wool is, the more of its neighbors it can link up to. So if you have a very long staple, you can make a very long but very thin and fine thread.
That's strong.
That's strong and makes
Right.
a very high quality wool. So that's why it's such an important thing. So that's going to be your spinning wool. That's what you'd make into, yarn and thread. But you're right, you don't want to waste it.
Like this belly wool, I've read before that even this wool right here, this is so much shorter, like this staple length is so much shorter than the longer parts of the fleece, but this could be carded and this could be used as the fill for quilts.
Yep.
It could also be spun and used for carpets. Like the parts of the fleece could and would have been used. Every summer in high school, every summer in college, I spent my summers taking the fleece, washing it, dyeing it, and spinning it. And I have to say that today, because of that, whenever I put on a piece of clothing that's made of wool, it's not just a piece of clothing. Like, I do think of the animal that it came from. I do think of this relationship that man has had with this animal for over 1,000 years. And there's something so special about that wool is something that kept us warm.
If I remember correctly, I think sheep were domesticated, I think, only second to dogs.
Really?
It's one of the animals that mankind has had the longest relationship with.
So many thousands of years.
Many thousands of years,
Okay.
way back into prehistory. I think about how much time it takes, because shearing, maybe it takes me half an hour, but, if we get 3 pounds of wool out of this fleece, that's probably 30 hours of carding.
Oh yeah.
On top of the picking and scouring, and then you have many, many hours of spinning before you could even think about weaving it into a cloth that you could potentially make into a garment. So it's a tremendous amount of labor, tremendous amount of work.
Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Dave.
well, thank you so much,
This has
Rajiv. I'm
been
happy to share this with you.
It's been a joy.
Absolutely, thank you.
I'm here with Joel Halterman, who operates the carding mill here at Old Sturbridge Village. And that sound we're hearing is...
It is our water wheel, so that is directly below us. It's connected to some gears that are in turn powering the machines we have up here.
These machines date to...
Around 1820,
Wow.
they are
So
original.
200 years old?
about, yeah.
And they still work.
They do still work. They can be a little finicky, but they do still work most of the time.
So Joel, I have spent many, many, many hours carding wool manually, but I have read about these carding mills that were set up all over the country that would really help farmers when they had shorn their sheep. The families would take the wool into a carding mill and have it actually carded to save them like half the amount of work for processing this fiber. I would love to see how these work. Could you just walk us through?
That's exactly what we're doing. We're saving people lots and lots of time and work.
Yep.
With this machine, the wool is starting in the front, so our wool has been cleaned. That's something that farmers would have to do first.
They'd clean it.
They would have to clean it first. We
Yep.
don't want dirty wool, but it's still in a very tangled up state. And so, as you know, carding is a process of combing it out, preparing it, in this case for spinning. And here, the wool will start on a conveyor belt. It will feed in. And then all of these rollers have the same kind of wire brush on them that you'll find on the hand cards.
These are hand
That's exactly
carders.
what they are.
So it's the same type of tines that are on those?
That's exactly what it is. And in this case, there's lots of rollers that are doing a much more efficient job than you can do by hand. There's 5 pairs of them that are doing the carding.
Yep.
And then it's going to come out the other end as rolls for spinning.
So there's rollers all the way back to here,
Correct.
and then do you pull it off of here?
We don't have to. Everything is done by the machine. What we have is a doffer, which is take off a strip from the main roller, a strip at a time. The
Yeah.
arm here will peel that strip off, and then it gets rolled up in these grooves into the rolls. And this is the end product, rolls that are ready to spin. That one's a little thin, but normally they'd be a bit thicker, but they are prepared for spinning.
This is kind of exactly what I would produce on a pair
It's
of
doing
carders.
the same thing, but much faster,
Wow.
much faster.
So I can see one thing moving right now. There's a leather
That's
band
exactly
over
right.
there moving. And so in order to get this to work, you just sort of engage the band?
It's a very simple clutch.
Yeah.
Right now it's on an idle pulley that's not connected to the machine.
Yeah.
By sliding this lever, it will engage the machine and start running. There it goes.
So these are coming off here, and when you have a bunch of these,
So we're bundling up into bundles like this that you would then take home and spin into yarn on your spinning wheel. So that's our end product.
that is beautiful.
It's doing a much faster and better job than you could do by hand.
To see this 200-year-old machine in action, it's amazing. And then that one over there creates,
It creates batting for stuffing. And the process is very similar to the other machine. It feeds in this
Yeah.
case from the back. It's pairs of rollers that do the carding.
Yeah.
The real difference here is at the end. Instead of being taken off in strips and
Yeah.
rolled up as the other machine did, it's actually going to come off as a single layer and make sheets of batting. And that's something that is very good for stuffing blankets, for quilts.
Yeah.
It keeps you very warm in the winter. Even thin layers in vests to make you look a little more robust.
wow.
And again, you can see up here where that arm is peeling off a single very thin layer. It builds up on the drum, and once it's as thick as they want it, I can simply tear it and have a nice sheet.
That's beautiful.
And I actually have a piece right here that's a finished batting
Oh,
to give you
really?
an idea. So this is a section of batting, and
Wow.
again, very soft,
That's so
keep
nice.
you very warm in our New England winters here.
So this sort of thing was a seasonal operation.
Well, our busiest season is spring. That's when farmers are mostly shearing their sheep.
Yep.
And during that spring season, they would be bringing wool to us, and we are charging them by the pound, running it through one of these two machines, depending on the product that they desire. Once upon a time, these were in every village, certainly in New England.
Really?
Yes.
Like this was a common thing.
The early 1800s, by around 1815, they say every village in Massachusetts had a carding machine like this.
Really?
They became very common during that period.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Absolutely, nice to meet you.
We're here with Rachel Hollenbeck, who has a job here that's very near and dear to my heart, spinning the fleece from the sheep into yarn. Rachel, you're using a wheel that is completely unfamiliar to me. I used a flax wheel, like a wheel where I was sitting and that had a treadle, and both of my hands were free. But this is called a...
walking wheel, wool wheel, great wheel, lots of different names.
It's very big. It's a lot bigger than the wheel that I was using. And there's no pedal, right?
No pedal. This is some wool that was carded at a carding mill. It's nice long pieces. I'm going to overlap the piece that's already been spun and the piece that hasn't been spun yet, and then turn the wheel, and as I turn the wheel, the yarn falls off the end of the spindle and it twists those two separate fibers together. So then I will wind this back, and the wool has crimps and kinks and scales in it that want to stay together. So I will gently draw it out. Those scales will catch on each other, and then when I turn the wheel, they'll twist together. So I'll do it quickly, and then wind that onto the back, draw out my next piece, spin it, wind it onto the back, and just keep doing that until I get to the end of this piece, and then I will splice on my next one.
So you've reached the end there, and now you're going to attach a new piece to that. And I love this part. I think people enjoy seeing, like, how does that happen? It's kind of like magic. And those microscopic barbs will just adhere to the previous thread with that little bit of twist. And now it's like seamless.
I will just keep adding wool and make this piece really long until I fill up my spindle. When we finish filling up the spindle, we take off the yarn and we put it onto a niddy noddy or some device to just set the twist. We need to set the twist because if we let go of it right now, it's just going to untwist, 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 and fluff back up again.
Right.
So from here, we fill up the spindle, wrap it around a nitty knotty, leave it for at least 12 hours to set the twist, and then measure it to see how many yards we have and if we have enough for a scarf, a hat, stockings, or if more needs to be spun.
I know what a nitty knotty is, but I'm sure many people out there don't. Do you have one handy?
Yes.
Nitty knotty. That is a real term?
Yes. Knotty as in you're nodding your head, not as in someone's misbehaving. But wrapping the yarn around and around and around, not stretching it, just keeping it taut. And then from there, we can also measure it, because with this nitty knotty, every time you go all the way around, you have 2 yards.
Okay.
So we can just count how many times have we gone around, multiply it by 2, and say, oh, I have enough for the hat, or I need to spin 50 more yards for it, something like that.
Is this wool that was spun on this wheel?
Yes.
This is beautiful. It was so beautiful to see this wheel in action. Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome.
Fascinating. When I have traveled through the Lake District in England, when I visited my friends in Ireland, which I do regularly, and when we're driving through rural countryside and I see sheep on the hillside, I very often tear up. I see those little white flecks out there in the sunshine or in the rain. They're just out there, they're eating their grass, the lambs are jumping around, and I think back to all the summers, the wonderful summers I spent with those animals, taking their fleece and all summer long, quietly pulling it apart, washing it, combing it, spinning it into yarn, thinking about how ancient this practice was, to take a fiber from an animal. And what that did to me was it gave me something that was a connection with this fiber, wool, that is almost spiritual. So this has been so wonderful to be here at Old Sturbridge Village and to bring back this little part of my life that is really meaningful to me and to share it with you. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, subscribe to this channel and to mine at Rajiv Surendra. Goodbye. It's raining. We gotta go. I'm so tempted to go. May I?
Yeah.
I just wanna.
Just trim a
I'm
little.
so tempted. It does work.
Yeah, see? This is a lot of trust right now.
I know. I'm honored.